we finally have the updated sales for this bad boy. I have been eagerly waiting for this latest financial report to see where the sales for Metroid Dread stand as of 2022. The last time we got financial reports, I believe, was in February, and that only went up as far as December 2021. And at that point, I believe the sales for Metroid Dread stood at around 2.74 million, something like that. It was right behind Metroid Prime, but it still hadn't been beaten yet. And at that point, we were all like, okay, next time we hear about sales for the game, it will have beaten Metroid Prime and it will have reached 3 million. It will have easily have surpassed Metroid Prime, and it will easily be the best-selling Metroid game, and it will have reached 3 million. Yes and no, because it turns out, first of all, Metroid Dread is the best-selling Metroid game. After 20 years, Metroid Prime has finally been dethroned. Metroid Dread, the game we've been waiting for 15 years for, or 20 years even if you want to count the wait from Fusion, the game we've been waiting 20 years for beat the game that came out 20 years ago. That's kind of ironic. But the caveat to that is it didn't reach 3 million. Much to my shock, the game is at, I believe, 2.84 million, which means or 2.94 million, something like that. Which means it is past Metroid Prime, but barely. And the fact that it didn't reach 3 million, it kind of paints a picture that maybe the sales for this game are slowing down. Metroid Dread might not have the legs we thought it did. And look, regardless of that, let's not beat around the bush here. Even if the game doesn't reach 3 million, and it will by the end of the year, obviously, if things keep going, it just maybe not by the next report, but definitely by the one after that, it would have reached 3 million. But that aside, the game didn't need to reach 3 million to be a success. Metroid Dread is a success in every way it could be. It came out and was a fantastic game, first and foremost. It revitalized interest in the franchise. It was highly successful. It sold twice as much as the last two Metroid games combined, Federation Force and Samus Returns. It sold more than the last console Metroid game, which was Other M in 2010. It got loads of good reviews. Everyone was praising the game. It surpassed a lot of expectations. Nintendo heavily marketed the game. It was dominating pre-order charts for weeks leading up to its release, and afterwards even. For like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, Metroid Dread was like the most ordered Nintendo game on Amazon. So, with that in mind, from Nintendo's perspective, you've got to imagine the game is a success. They're not looking at it with these ludicrous expectations. Nintendo are not expecting a 10 million seller here. They were looking for a game that could deliver what the fans want, could attract new fans, and would sell really good for what a Metroid game could sell. And it did. 2.9 million. It is now the best Metroid game. I don't know if Nintendo quite expected it to go that far. Maybe they did, which is why they marketed so much. But even at that, it's the best-selling Metroid game. It's one of the best reviewed Metroid games. Most people claim it to be the best Metroid game. So in every sense, the situation is a massive success. The game launched and fulfilled all the criteria it needed to fill. This arbitrary 3 million number is something that I myself, as well as I guess most of you as well, it was a number we all had in our heads because Prime was 2 million, we all wanted to reach 3 million just so it could beat Prime and push the goal at least 1 million sales higher. We had hopes that this could be like Fire Emblem Awakening, where sales just absolutely get catapulted into higher numbers. Personally, myself, what I was hoping for in this situation was the sales to explode. I was expecting lifetime sales would ultimately amount to 3 to 4 million, at most. 3.5 million I was willing to bet at. and it would catapult Metroid into mainstream notoriety, and the series would become a big seller once and for all. It didn't quite get there. In fact, lifetime sales are probably going to be like 3.2 to 3.3 million, I reckon. So it didn't reach that goal, which is disappointing. I'm not going to lie, I'm slightly disappointed in that sense, because if this game, the game the fans have been demanding for 20 years, the game we kept saying would save the franchise and be the one, if this game couldn't break the mold, if this couldn't make Metroid into a 5+ million seller, then what game could? Is there any Metroid game that could release that could break the mold? Because it seems like maybe Metroid is stuck to be in this 2 to 3 million range. That's not a comment on the quality. Obviously, these are very high quality games, the majority of them. But they were always overlooked by the general public. Most people don't have an interest in these games. And that's something I, as a fan, struggled to understand for years. But with Dread in particular, and I've seen a lot of people say this, it kind of comes down to the difficulty. The game is very difficult. It's really difficult. Probably one of the hardest games on Switch, so that probably turned a lot of people away. Maybe the fact that it's the final chapter turned a lot of people away. I don't know. Or just the fact that this genre, no matter how good the games are, no matter how well they're marketed, this type of genre is forever destined to be kind of niche. Metroid is never going to be on the scale of Mario or Zelda, which is heartbreaking as a hardcore fan to say, but this situation is showing to me, yeah, the best Metroid can hope for is a 3 to 4 million range, maybe. Hey, that's not a bad thing. At those numbers, it's selling better than Fire Emblem. And Fire Emblem is hugely acclaimed and is getting new releases regularly now. It's more than Pikmin. It's more than Xenoblade Chronicles. All of them. So Metroid Dread is by no means a failure in that regard. It's still a success. Even if it doesn't reach the 3.5 million, the game has sold more than some of these other really popular franchises that are around at the moment. And it's guaranteed a future for Metroid. We are guaranteed more games coming down the line. Yes, it might be another 10 years before Metroid 6, but we are getting more games. There is a future for this franchise, and Nintendo finally sees that now. So we don't really have anything to worry about in that regard. 3 million was this arbitrary number we set ourselves, and I'm sure Nintendo probably didn't think that high. I don't know, obviously, but I would hazard a guess Nintendo probably put it at around 2.5 million, but it outsold Metroid Prime. And that's the best outcome. That's what we have to accept. And the Metroid genre may never take off in the mainstream audience, but at least it can take off among Nintendo fans. And at least Metroid has finally got a stable foothold. But what about Metroid Prime? Because while Metroid 5 is the mainline game, Dread is the mainline game, Metroid Prime is a spin-off, in the public eye, Metroid Prime being a first-person game versus a 2D game technically puts it at a higher advantage and a higher appeal than something like Metroid Dread. So does this mean Metroid Prime could be the one to pass 3 million? If Metroid Dread couldn't, is Metroid Prime 4 in particular the game that could steer the series into that big catapulted high million range we all really want? And yeah, possibly. It was the first Metroid game announced for the Nintendo Switch. It's not a 2D game, so it does have the advantage of being a first-person shooter. That will benefit it greatly, especially if it has multiplayer. So Metroid Prime 4 has a high chance of taking that. Realistically, it's going to be on the Switch, so it's probably going to become the best-selling Metroid game. I would be shocked if it doesn't beat Metroid Dread. And obviously before that, we have to ask ourselves, What about Metroid Prime 1 or Prime Trilogy, if that's coming this year? I believe Prime Trilogy, the last time it came out, sold around 1 million copies. I don't know the exact numbers. I'll have them here on screen. Does it have a higher chance on Switch? Depends. If it's a Trilogy collection, it'll probably sell 1.5 to 2 million. If it's a Prime remake, it'll sell around Metroid Dread's numbers, I think. Possibly more, depending on how brand new the game actually is. Which is really funny, because that means Metroid Dread only has like a few months as being the best-selling game before the previous best-selling Metroid game overtakes it again, exactly 20 years later. What a funny lineup, irony, coincidence, whatever you want to call it there. But yeah, all around, look, these are just my thoughts on the situation. Obviously, I am really happy for Metroid Dread. 2.9 million sales, yes, it's measly compared to other Nintendo franchises, but for Metroid, and as a franchise that's traditionally been a lot weaker in sales, this is a huge achievement. It surpassed all expectations in that regard, in that department. And this arbitrary 3 million number, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's still getting the praise it deserves. We're still going to get more games. Everything turned out okay in the end, which I'm really happy for. And hopefully it won't be too long before it actually does pass 3 million, but we'll see. But let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think of Metroid Dread's sales? Are you happy? Were you disappointed like me? Did you think it would be past 3 million by now? Did you not think? Will Metroid Prime Trilogy or whatever comes this year surpass this game? What type of sales could we look at for Metroid Prime 4? I want to hear everything you have to say down in the comment section below. And yeah, with that all said, thank you all for watching and please subscribe. Novus Corvis out.